1, right? So it increments from that 201 to 202. And then you see here, before sending this, the local state for P2 is 100 according to P3. Now it is sending this message to P2 itself. So, like we did in another example, we have to change this to 202 because this is being sent after getting to know about P2 through this message. So it's causally dependent. So this happened before this. So you have to change this now to P2 202. That's the updated local state information for P2. And in the message, what do you include? The timestamp 202 and the history prior to sending this. Okay, the history prior to sending this is this. P2100. So in the message you include only things before this. So you include the timestamp, latest timestamp, but the attachment information that you include should be things that you know prior to sending this. So before sending this, you got to know this about P2. So include that information here. Is that clear? So when P2 gets this message, and you see from here, nothing happened at P2. Right? So its clock value is 000. So when P2 gets this message, should it accept it or not? How does it decide? It sees whether there is an entry for itself in the attachment to that message, and there is one, P2100. What does it mean? Something has been sent to P2 prior to sending this, right? Not by P, maybe by P3, but it came from some other process actually. But this indicates the timestamp of the message that was sent to P2 by someone. And P2 checks its local clock value, which is 000, right? If that message was received by P2, its local clock value should be greater than this. Why? Because it should have received this and then incremented its own clock for receiving, so that should be 110, right? So if this message was received by P2, its local clock value should be at least 110, because it should correspond to the timestamp of the message, and then this 0 should be incremented to 1 because of receiving, right? But P2's clock value is all zeros, so which means this is less than this, right? So which means what? P2 has not received this message. Is that clear? P2 has not received this message that was sent prior to sending this message. So which means P2 has to buffer this message. Why? This message was not yet received. It cannot accept the other new message, right? So it has to wait for that message to come. And this message is sent from where? P1. So this is a message, right? And this doesn't have any information about P2, which means there's no message that was sent prior to this message to P2. So when P2 gets this, it can what? Increment its clock value from this 0010 to 010, and then do a component-wise maximum. 1 and 0 maximum is 1, 0 and 1 maximum is 1, 0 and 0 maximum is 0. So this is the new clock value at P2. So now it compares this with this, the buffered one. And now its clock value is greater than this one, right? So which means it has got that message, which is this, it was received. So now it can go ahead and process this message. Is that clear? Okay? So it got that, so it now increments first how? This 1 is incremented to 2, and then maximum of this timestamp is 202, so maximum of 2 and 0 is 2 and 1 is 2, then this 2 and the 0 is 2. So this is its local clock value now. And it doesn't need to store this information. Why? I said in the other cases I need to copy this information like here, right? From this you learned about P2 and you have to update it. Now it doesn't need to include this here. Why? Because this is about P2 itself. And P2 got to know that message. It got that message. Right? So if it was something about P3 or P1 here, if there's something about P1 here, P2 should have stored that here in its local state. But there's nothing about any other process except P2. And P2 is the guy who's receiving and processing it. So you don't need to tell because somebody else is telling what happened at you, and you've got to know that. That's why you're accepting this message. So there's no need to put something about, somebody else is telling what is a local clock. There's no need to do that. You know more information about yourself than others, right? So that's why P2 doesn't need to store information about itself. Is that clear? Why P2 is not storing this? Because it's about itself. And it already got that message. So why you need to store that information? But if it was about P1 in this message, the attachment, you need to store that information there. Okay? So that is this thing, and I have one more algorithm, but one more example, but it's the same thing. Okay? So I'll leave it as a practice for you to figure out. We went through both of them extensively. So I'm just putting the two things together here. So I think we almost went over it, the first example, like these two. So try to practice and see if you can understand why the clock values have changed. Okay? So, yeah, so you understood the basics of this thing, right? So you include in the attachment things that were sent prior to this that you got to know. Okay? And let's look at just one part of it here, because this part we already did in the first example, if you remember that. So let's do this. There is a message that is sent by P1 to P3, and that message carries this information. It was generated at timestamp 332, and there is a history that P1 knows about P3. Something has been sent to P3 with this timestamp 022. Now let's see whether P3 can accept this message or not. Prior to receiving this, its local clock value is 002. So, when this message was sent, the sender P1 got to know that something has been sent to P3 with this timestamp 022. Right? So P3 should have got that message. Right? And P3's local clock value is what? 002. It means P3 has not got it yet. Right? So you have been sent something, P3 has been sent something prior to the sending of this. So that something has to be received before you process this. Right? So you have to just buffer this message, the red one. So now P3 has to wait for the other message to come. So that message comes here. Okay? And this message carries this information. And looking at this, do you think now P3 can accept this message? Yes, because there's no information about P3 here, the attachment, which means there's nothing that was sent prior to this to P3. Right? So which means there's no dependency. So P3 can accept this. So you can increment the clock value from 002, this can be incremented to 3, and then what it does, it takes a component-wise maximum. So this is 003, and then it does 0 and 0 is 0, 0 and 2 is a 2, 3 and 2, 3. So this is the local clock value, and now you already have some local state about what P1 and P2, right? So watch this now. So how to handle this? Now, this message also carries the same information about P1, right? P1001, P1001. So you cannot do much, you have to just remain the same, having the same. If this carries some updated information about P1, say something else, P1002 or something, then you have to change that to that, right? But this one carries the same information about P1, so just retain that. Now what about this? You think P2's clock value should be at least 002. This is at P3, right? And P2 is the one who's sending this message, right? To P3. And P2 puts a timestamp for the sending message is what? 022. Which means what? P2's clock value is at 022, which is greater than 002, right? So which means P2 has already got that message. That's why its local clock value has now moved to 022, right? So there's no need for P3 to buffer that information. P2 already has this is your current knowledge about P1. And the message is also telling P1's clock value should be this. You don't know whether P1 got to know this or not. So you have to store that until you learn from P1 that his clock value has passed beyond this. Alright? And we'll see in the next message that happens. But right now, P3 cannot make sure that P1 at least got that message with timestamp 001 that was sent to it, either by P3 or by some other process. Okay? Now, your local clock value is 023, right? And what is the timestamp here for P3? The message it is 022, right? So your local clock value is now more than this. So it means you can, what? It means you have received this message, essentially, this message that was sent, right? So you can accept this message, and how do you increment the clock values? You can make this 024, right? This is receiving, so 024, and then how do you update the rest? Take a maximum of what? 024. This is 024. So, with what you would compare? You're buffering and processing this message. So you look at the timestamp of this message, 332, right? So take the maximum of each one. So 0 and 3, the maximum is 3. 2 and 3, the maximum is 3. And 4 and 2, the maximum is 4. So this is the timestamp now at P3, 334, right? And what about this entry? You have P1001 here, and this is coming from P1, right? And P1's timestamp is 332 in this message. So its clock value is 332 while sending this message, P1's clock value. And that is greater than what you know about P1. So it means P1 is kind of indicating here that it received this message that was sent to it with timestamp 001, right? Because P1's clock value would not have been greater than this 001 if it has not received this message. Only way its clock value is greater than this, because why? That's why you're receiving. You're incrementing while receiving, right? So you're increasing like even if you look at this. This is 0 if you're incrementing if your clock value is 000, okay, and there's something else before that, you're incrementing your clock value to 001 and making something that was sent after this to have a larger clock value, right? So you are incrementing due to receiving to indicate to others that you have received it. If you look at even this number, this is 332, right? And this is 001. So P1 is the first entry, right? So you make sure that this entry is greater than this entry, which is a 0. So if it has been a 0, what it means? It has not got this message that was sent to it. If it is 1, 2 or 3, something greater than 0, it has this entry, it has to be something greater than 0. If this was a 0, it's sure that this message was not delivered to P1, right? Because if P1 did not get, if P1 has received it, it would have incremented due to the receiving event. But the fact that if this is a 0, it means P1 has not got it yet, right? So that's why you make sure to increment while receiving, and that's what this indicates. When it is 332, everything is of course greater than this, but what is specifically of importance to us? The first entry that corresponds to P1, which is a 3, is greater than 0. So that means it has got this message. If it has not got this, this would have still stayed at 0. Right? Because the other entries 3 and 2 are coming from other processes. You cannot control them. The only thing P1 can control is what? Its own entry. So it would have incremented its own entry only if it has received this message. Is that clear? So that's why it's important to increment while receiving. And so now you learned that this is 332, so P3 don't need to buffer anything about P1 because it's outdated now. So that's why it removes, there's no need to store anything for P1 now here. Because P1 already got to know about it. Okay? Clear? Kind of? Okay, so go through the video. I have already recorded videos on this and same examples. Okay? An exam, I'll just give you a short thing like examples 1 and 2. Okay? This is just to make sure that you understood the whole thing. Okay, the other one is going to be easy now. So this is just one algorithm that is little involved. Well, that it's very efficient in terms of unicasting. And the time complexity is you send only one message because you don't need to broadcast to everyone. So that's the good part of it. The bad part of it is the overhead because you need to maintain information about every process, right? At the worst case, like for example, P3 has to maintain information about P1, P2, and sometimes about just one process P1. So we need, if there are n processes, we need to maintain n minus 1 entries, and then each entry is a clock. So that's again n, right? Now, I think I emailed you back to Blackboard, difference between theta and big code. If you look at that code, do you understand what it does? You had a for loop that runs basically from I equals 0, I less than n, and I plus plus. And inside that for loop, there was some fun, there was a function, I don't know remember the order, but let's say it is in this order, f of I, and if some condition holds good, then you break from the loop, right?
F of I was under it.
F of I was after the if statement? Okay, so it shouldn't matter much, but let's see. So if the condition is true, you break from the for loop, and then f of I is after that. And f of I takes theta of one time, means it takes constant time to run. Okay? So now, if you want to analyze the what do you call the complexity of this, okay? Is this loop going to run always n times? Is this for loop going to run always n times or always n minus 1 times? No. It depends on the condition, right? It may run just once or twice, right? Or some number of times, depends on the condition, right? And each time it runs, it of course calls f of I, and that takes it of one time, right? So the overall number of times the loop runs really depends on the condition. So we cannot say the complexity is to be very theoretically correct. We cannot say it is theta of n. Why? Because theta of n is more of a type bound. Okay? So we can say n minus 1 or n plus 1 is theta of n if it is always n minus 1 times. If the number of times the loop runs is always n minus 1 or always n minus 2 or always n minus 3, then we can say this. But this is a varying thing. You cannot say it always runs n minus 1, always runs n minus 2. You cannot say that. Right? At the minimum it could run just once. At the maximum it could run n times. Right? So that n is the worst case number of times the loop could run. So that's where you have to say it is big O of n. So big O is what? And the worst case is this, like whatever the number of times it runs is less than or equal to n. Right? How many times it runs, it varies. But whatever times it runs, that's going to be less than or equal to n. Is that clear? So it's more theoretically correct to say the runtime complexity of this is big O of n rather than theta of n. If you know for sure how many times this loop runs, we can say theta of n. If that's a varying thing, and then we have to look at the worst case, how many times it runs. Okay, so then we can say it is big O. So why I have that put out here? the number of entries you maintain here for the other processes, it varies. If, like in this case, you deleted the entries after you got to know that they were not needed. So, in the worst case, you could maintain for every process, right? So, that's why you can say storage overhead is big O of n square. Why n square? N minus 1 processes, and each process is n integer clock, right? So, it is 2-dimensional, n square. Then the message size, again, the amount of information that you are piggybacking on each time. Some messages don't carry anything. Some messages may carry just one entry. Some messages may carry here actually the 3 processes only. So it carries all the n minus 1 information. So in the worst case, you may be carrying about all the processes, and each process has again an n integer clock. So that is again big O of n square. Okay? So the information you are carrying in each message, the message size is big O of n square. So it would be more correct to say it is as big O of n square rather than theta of n square. Okay? So remember there is a difference between the two. So now let's look at the last of the 3 algorithms. This is more straightforward. This is the matrix based. So here we can use it for both unicast and broadcast communication depending on what we need to do. So the first example is unicast thing. So each process sends only to the other process. So we store a matrix for each process. So the matrix has, of course, n elements, n rows, n columns. The ith row, so this is say a process PI's matrix. So each process maintains a matrix. The matrix for process I, of course, has rows and columns. So the ith row in that matrix should indicate the number of messages that were sent by process PI to others. Okay? So the others are what? All processes 0, 1, 2, 3 up to n minus 1, all those processes. Similarly, the column, the ith column indicates the number of messages that PI should have received from others. Okay, so the rows indicate the number of messages you have sent to others, the ith row for PI. The ith column for PI indicates what? The number of messages PI should have received from others at that time. Okay, so again, since you are maintaining explicitly the number of messages you have received from other processes, during the receiving operation or event, you don't need to increment your clock. You are incrementing your clock only to send, which is this basically. You are adding this in sending information here. Okay? So let's do this. So we have, again, to start with, it's all zeros. So this is a matrix, this is a matrix, this is a matrix at every process. And P1 is sending something to P2, right? So how does it handle that? You're sending, right? So you're sending from where? P1 to P2. So go to the first row, P1. P1's row. And you're sending to whom? P2. So increment the second value. So of course previously it was all zeros, right? 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So increment this 0 to 1. Everything else is the same. So the message carries that matrix timestamp. So the same thing is in the message also. Okay? Timestamp is not a matrix. Is that clear? And now after sending this, what you do, you send this message. To whom? To P3. So P1 again, which one will increment? The P3's thing. So this is to 3. So increment that to 1. So this is now from incremented 0 to 1. So everything else is the same. So you send that going to this. Right? So the timestamp is the same thing, the matrix. So now you have to decide whether to accept this message or not. So how do you decide that? This is your local matrix. So you have to now make sure you got received all those messages that are supposed to receive before to this, right? So which column you will look at? This is P3, right? So you look at the third column. This is the third column. The third column, here it is all zeros. So how would you check that? This is coming from P1, right? So you put have it 0 here and you have a 1 here, and that's understandable because this 1 is because of sending from P1. Right? Like the first term got it. The 1 difference is because of the sending. But the other entries should be exactly the same or even greater if this guy knows more. But this should be at least the same as this. In this case, yes. All these other entries indicate what? P3's knowledge about things that is received from others, right? So P3 should have got everything that P1 has got, right? P1 got to know that they are sent to P3. And P1 says 0, 0. So P3 also has 0, 0. So it knows at least what this message knows, or who a sender sends it knows, right? So P3 can accept this. And how you update your clock, just take the component-wise maximum for the matrices. As you see, you don't need to change anything on these two columns. You just have the same thing. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. You don't need to change anything for these two values, right? But we do the component-wise maximum for the others. So it is 0, maximum is 0, 1, and this 0 is 1, this 1, 0, 1, and so on. So do the component-wise maximum. Okay? So that's your clock, the matrix clock. So now P3 is sending something to P2. So how to increment this matrix or change this? P3 is sending to P2, right? So you change the row or column. The rows keep track of sending. The column keeps track of receiving. So here P3 sends a message to P2. So what you do? You go to the column, third row, and you're sending to whom? P2. So increment this entry from 0 to 1. You're sending to P2 from P3. So go to the row for P3 and increment the column to the receiver. That's what I'm going to do this one. And everything else will remain the same. Okay? And send this as your timestamp for this message. So now it is the job for P2 to decide whether to accept it or not. And P2's clock is, matrix is this. Nothing has happened at P2 until this time. Right? So, how does P2 check whether to accept it or not? Look at the second column. Look at the second column here. What does it indicate? The message comes from P3, right? So it's understandable the last entry is a 1 here and it is 0 because that 1 difference is because of sending this. But the other two should be exactly this, or this could even have more larger information. But here it is 0, 0 and this is 1, 0. Which means what? Something has been sent to P2. This is P2, right? Something has been sent to P2 that this guy knows that P2 itself doesn't know that. Right? That's what this means, right? This is 1 to indicate that something has been sent to P2. And P2 doesn't know about it. If P2 has known about it, it would be 1. Right? So, which means something was sent before this message. So that particular message should be received first before processing this. So P2 buffers this and waits for that message to come. So that message comes now. Comes from whom? Comes from P1. And this is a timestamp carried by that message. So now what does P2 does? It again goes to the comparison. Right? It receives this message from whom? This one? P1. So which thing it will process? Here, look at it. First column. It got it from, it is still P2, it looks